Any system can be presented as a flow rather than a fixed program. Systems in this context refer to structured spiritual or self-development approaches that organize experience into a path. These approaches include meditation frameworks, devotional practices, yogic disciplines, philosophical teachings, and contemporary programs that guide, in essence, through stages of progression to enlightenment or spiritual aha-ness. They are called systems because they provide a method and establish a sequence that orients attention toward an expected outcome. The central idea is frequently framed as the restoration of what is called the mirror of the mind, which is said to become clear through sustained practice and usually a guru to help polish it. From a metaspherical lens, the assumption of restoration reveals the structure being maintained. To restore something implies that it was altered or lost. It assumes that clarity once existed, became obscured, and must now be brought back. This creates a narrative of departure followed by recovery. What is being called the mind is treated as a surface that can be cleaned or refined. It is described as scattered at one point and fragrant at another. These descriptions introduce comparison and direction. They suggest movement from one condition to another. This movement is interpretive. Conduction does not degrade and it does not require restoration. What appears as distortion is the continuation of interpretation. When interpretation is maintained, clarity appears absent. When interpretation is not maintained, nothing needs to be restored because nothing was structurally altered. The idea of a journey from confusion to clarity continues this pattern. It presents articulation as something that evolves through stages. It suggests that progression leads to completion. From a metaspherical perspective, there is no movement from one condition to another. What appears as progression is the ordering of modulation into sequence. That ordering creates the appearance of a path. A flow can appear less rigid than a structured program, yet it still sustains the same assumption that something is unfolding toward an outcome. The introduction of devotional orientation through the idea of maintaining a loving presence continues the identical structure. It positions the divine as something to be related to. It introduces a direction of attention towards something perceived as beyond the essence. This creates separation. From a metaspherical perspective, devotional adherence is not required because nothing is obscured outside of interpretation. Practical instructions such as maintaining a routine, focusing attention, or ritualistic offerings to goddesses or deities beyond the essence preserve the same orientation. They create structure around what is described as practice. They sustain the idea that repetition produces realization. Surrender is not something that is done or applied. It becomes clear when the continuity of maintaining interpretation is no longer sustained. There is no method for it and no step that produces it. What is called surrender is simply the noticing of how interpretation is being maintained. Surrender is therefore not a sequence. It is the non-continuation of what was being repeated. Allowance remains when the movements that sustain seeking are no longer continued. This includes the attempt to improve, the effort to reach a different condition, and the habit of interpreting what appears as something that must be managed. When these are no longer conducted, there's nothing to do or practice because what remains is not being interfered with. B is not something that emerges from a process. It does not come into place after refinement, and it is not produced through devotion or understanding. It is not acquired by invoking presence. It is not dependent on progression or accumulation. It is already present prior to any attempt to shape or direct experience, and it becomes obvious when those attempts are no longer sustained. There is no mirror to restore because nothing was altered. There is no journey to complete because nothing departed. No practice is required because nothing is missing. What remains is conduction without the imposition of attention, methodology, or a quest for spiritual enlightenment. This is the language of the spheres.